Welcome to the Sage Family Podcast, where we explore natural homeschooling, gentle parenting, simple living, and family adventure.
I'm Rachel Rainbolt, the Sage Family Mentor, coming to you from an island in the Pacific Northwest, where I live wild and free in connection with my hilarious husband and 3 growing sailors in our fixer-upper on the beach. So join us around the campfire and let's get living the family life of our dreams. This is episode 85, and today I'm here with Claire Wilson talking about Polyvagal Theory. Claire is the author of the internationally acclaimed book, Grounded, Discovering the Missing Piece in the Puzzle of Children's Behavior, and TEDx Talk on our children's mental health crisis. She is able to speak, inspire, train groups on tough subjects while keeping them emotionally safe. She is the founder of Grounded Grownups and loves working closely with those who really want to change. There was a whole lesson in the new Sage Mothering course on states to help us integrate an understanding of our nervous system into our parenting, an awareness of where we are on that ladder, and a practice of flexibility in moving between states. If you're ready to foster a healthy relationship with your nervous system, take the Sage Mothering course at sagefamily.com/mothering. Welcome to the show, Claire. Will you introduce yourself and share a bit about who you are and what you're passionate about?
Well, it's great to be here, and thank you for having me. A little bit about myself. Gosh, where do you start with that kind of question? You know, I'm a complex human being like the rest of us are. I love some of the things that I love to do include being outside. That's one of my favorite things. Growing stuff that I can eat, high up there on my favorite things to do. Paddleboarding. Yeah, stand-up paddleboarding. New hobby, going very well.
Fun.
Really, really excellent. And the best exercise that I've yet found that I really enjoy because I don't realize that I'm doing it. Perfect. Aside from all of that, I love food. I love seeing people grow as well as vegetables. I love helping people figure stuff out that seems kind of complicated. I think that's kind of one of my, somebody said it's a superpower that I had once, that it's like I can get into the really nitty-gritty tough stuff and kind of get complex stuff right down into simple ways that people can understand. And I guess, you know, professionally, it might be useful to just put a bit of context around this as well. So I fully qualified and highly experienced children's therapist and clinical supervisor for other therapists as well. I've spent many years as consultant for schools, primary schools essentially, and for parents and families here in the UK. And since the whole kind of polyvagal neuroception part of my journey, have had the opportunity to, you know, develop my training and speaking around that topic particularly. But I guess through all of it, you know, one of my biggest things that I can't help but do, even if I try not, but it's still there, is to advocate. Yeah, to kind of speak up and speak out for, I'm even getting emotional thinking about it. It's all right. Tissues are here. No, seriously, to speak up, to speak out when I see injustice happening, particularly around children, dogs, or adults who have experienced a lot of trauma in their early life.
I feel like I just fell so in love with you in such a short amount of time. That was a really good intro. And I relate to all of your passions, down to the stand-up paddleboarding.
Brilliant.
And all of your advocacy. Like really so many of us in this work, I feel like that's ultimately why we're here, you know, and why we're putting ourselves out there, having these conversations and doing these things, trying to speak up for people who are struggling and could use the support and could use somebody standing beside them saying, that makes sense that you would feel that way. And we have a lot of work to do in this world around you and everyone else, because you shouldn't have had to feel that way to begin with.
For sure. For sure.
Okay, can you introduce us to the autonomic nervous system and walk us through its hierarchy?
Easy. I tell you what, it's much easier to do this with diagrams when I'm doing training sessions and workshops and stuff. To actually do this visually is much easier, but here we go. So essentially and historically, we used to believe that the nervous system had the autonomic nervous system had two main parts to it. We had our parasympathetic state and we had our sympathetic nervous system, right? And the sympathetic, we've always known, is the one with the energy, and that's kind of your fight or your flight. And I'm a real stickler for let's not lump it together like I hear so many people, that's my fight and flight. I was in fight and flight, like it's Ben and Jerry's. It's like, no, they're two separate. Yes, they're part of the same, the same system, but they have actually very distinct impact on us neurophysiologically and how we see the world. So that's the sympathetic. That's always been there. We've always known about that. We used to think that we just had a parasympathetic element to us, which was kind of our calm, our quiet, our resting state, rest and digest. You would often hear it talked about as. And thank goodness, Mr. Stephen Porges, who is just a legend in this world, and I'm just utterly grateful to know him and to be part of helping to share his work. He came along and discovered that actually our parasympathetic nervous system has two parts to it. So the nervous system we used to think was just like two essential strands, we now know has three essential strands. And I don't want to get too kind of geeky and too complex, because like, how does that help us? Really, what I'm about is like, what does this mean? Where's the nitty gritty? So if we understand that we have a kind of a shut down state, which is part of our dorsal vagus, for those who are familiar with those terms, and it doesn't freak them out, then that's cool. If it does freak you out and you're like, what did she say? Then don't worry about it. It's not an issue. It's not going to impact your life if you can't, teach me back about dorsal and ventral and all of that. So we have a shut down place. And that's where we are like, we often feel overwhelmed. The world is, something has happened to us often that has been life-threatening. I mean, it's a pretty severe place to be, where everything is just crowding in too much. And that can be like, work stuff. That can be too many things to do. It can be too many demands. But in a nervous system pure, when we really, really go there into a proper shutdown, we actually think we're about to die. And it's not a fun place to be, but it's a phenomenal part of how we've been created. So, we can maybe talk a bit more about that. Then I spoke about our sympathetic, our fight or flight, and then we have our social engagement, which some people talk about as their safe and social. Deb talks about that. Deb Dana talks about that as a safe and social. I talk about that more as a grounded place. But essentially that's our ventral vagus. It's a separate branch, a more recent development in the evolutionary evolution of our nervous system. Dorsal came first, and then our sympathetic, and then our ventral vagus came last. So that's the place where we can feel safe, we can be kind of open, we can be connected to other people, we can do eye contact, we can plan stuff, we can make shopping lists and plan and pack to go on a holiday. All of that needs ventral vagus for that to happen.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got those three states, that dorsal vagal of like it's too hard, I give up, I'm about to die, depression, hopelessness, all of that. And then we've got that fight or flight, sort of anxiety, energy, panic kind of state. And then we've got the ventral vagal, which is like our resting state where we can be social and engage with other people and make shopping lists and all of that kind of stuff. And you refer to that state as being grounded, right?
Yeah. And it's not just to kind of chip in on that as well. It's not just our resting place. Actually, our social engagement state, our ventral vagus, is the place we need to be creative. Actually, to live and to flourish, and to do new things and be okay with it. It's also a place, people have this kind of misunderstanding that being grounded, being in social engagement means you have to be happy. Not true. You actually, when we're in that place, we get to experience all of our emotions. And we might be sad, we might be crying our eyes out, but still be in a socially connected way of being neurophysiologically with that, to be able to feel it, to be able to, reach out and explain it. And
so it's like we can feel that, like, sort of the full range of emotions without there being a threat to our survival. Which would knock us into one of the other states. Yeah,
that's right. Because if we got really consumed with anger, then we would be out of our social engagement and into fight. However, if we can learn how to be angry but stay grounded with it, then we get to be able to advocate. Then we get to be able to campaign and change things, because we need some of that sympathetic energy very often to kick us up the bum enough to care about stuff, to go, this is not okay. This is not okay. And I need to do something about this. Well, if I just go full on fight, then nobody's going to listen to a word I'm saying, because everybody's just like, whoa, she's scary. Because of neuroception, which we'll get to, I guess.
Yes.
But if we can temper that and stay grounded with that energy and that injustice, then we can campaign and advocate. And I think that's something that I've seen a lot in my work with parents, and kind of standing as a third party, going between parents and schools, where parents feel the injustice of what may or may not have happened for their child, and go into school all guns blazing, and school are just like, we can't interact with you because your nervous system state is in fight.
Yeah.
And that's not safe for us. So there's no connection here. There's no communication really that's effective. So, it's one of those things that, we have to figure out how we can be really angry and process that before we then try and do something with it to change the world for our child or for our family, or, the whole of the bigger world.
Oh, such a good point. Okay. Your book is called Grounded, and it was great, and everyone should read it, and we're going to link to it and all that good stuff. But help us understand, what does it mean to be grounded?
Well, we just covered that, really. Grounded, as I define it, is that part of our nervous system where we are in a social engagement state. We're in our ventral vagal place internally. It has nothing to do with, not being let out, having to stay home for a night or 10 days. And people are like, why did you call your book Grounded? It makes me think that, you're into really harsh punishment for kids. And I was like, well, there we go. There's another meaning to that word. And it has that sense of connection, actually being safe for ourselves and being safe for others, because it's such a powerful state to be in if we want to make things better for other people. If we want to be safety for our children in a classroom, in a home, wherever we are, then we need to know what that part of our nervous system is and try to live there more often than not. Now, one of the projects that I'm running at the moment is Grounded Grown-ups, and we explode the bomb where people are thinking, right, I have to be grounded all the time, because it's not true. It's not possible. It's absolutely not possible. And I say in the book, if you come across somebody who says that they are, super chill, super zen the whole time, you can take that with a pinch of salt, because actually it's more likely that they are dissociated. They're disconnected from reality. They're not actually living in a functioning, fluid and moving nervous system. So in Grounded Grown-ups, we know that we get the best out of us, and other people get the best out of us when we are in a safe social engagement, grounded state. But we take off the pressure to need to be there the whole time. Because when life happens, we're going to get angry, we're going to go into fight, or if stuff suddenly gets really scary, we are going to go into a flight state. And that's good, and that's right, and that's how we were made. And if stuff does get overwhelming, then we will be heading for shutdown. And again, thank goodness, because it's a brilliant way to get through when life is just like too much.
Yeah, sometimes these systems exist for a reason and have helped us survive for a reason. And sometimes they are called for and helpful. If I'm being attacked in an underground parking garage, I want fight. I want fight to fully take over. When my mother passed away and there was so much, trauma and drama around all of the family stuff, and I came home, I had a period of shutdown, which I needed to rest and restore and process. And that was helpful, for that part of my nervous system to take over and say, nope, nothing else can happen right now. You need a period of shutdown to restore and recover from that. So I love how you're we're not villainizing those parts of our nervous systems. We just want to be integrated and aware of them, and maybe shift our relationships with them so that we can be as healthy as possible.
That's right.
Okay, what is neuroception? You mentioned that word. It's a very important word to understand. Help us understand what that is.
It is. It's one of my favorite words in the whole world. And, I've been a student of Polyvagal Theory now for over a decade. And it's been 4 years since my book came out. And I can remember, no kidding, when I first started really digging into Stephen's work. I was like, neuroception, what is this thing? How am I ever going to remember this word? And I don't know if you have this in the States, but in the UK, when children are in school, they get given a little vocabulary book for French or Spanish. When you're learning new words, they're little books, and they have a line down the middle, and you can write in the English word, and on the other side of the line you write in whatever the French or the Spanish word is. So we would all have a vocabulary book to learn new words. I went and found one. I got myself a little book, and I started writing out all these words that one day I was going to be able to know what they mean. Thank goodness I now do. Neuroception is actually Stephen Porges' word. He made it up, and it speaks to a process that we all live every day, every minute of every day. And it's a subconscious process where we are taking in information, very often from sensory input, and then in less than a split second, subconsciously making a decision as to whether what's going on means that we are safe, or we are in danger, or our life is under threat. So it's this permanent state of kind of being on the lookout, assessing what's happening, updating the information that's coming into our system, and just making that decision. Am I safe? Is my life in danger, or is my life actually under threat? And there are four main areas where we get that information from. So one of them would be what's going on in the environment around us. If we're in a park and, there's a big dog comes running towards you, not a happy, friendly, let me come and say hello dog, but a real, I'm on a mission, I'm coming at you. You're probably going to go, yeah, it's not so safe right now. And you'd probably be right. So assessing that. One of my best friends is from the Caribbean. She took me with her on a trip out to see her family several years ago now. And there was one point we were on the dock waiting for a boat to come to take us to another island. And boats were late because, Caribbean, no problem. So we're just sitting there in the sun on a kind of a pillar. And there was this group of men just stood there, and they were all mostly related, and they were mostly really tall, family genes. And they started just chatting, and then quite quickly they are shouting and they are gesticulating, like real arms going and pointing fingers and all of this kind of stuff, and shouting at each other. And they were going so fast in their Trini dialect that I could not process what they were saying. My whole system just went, this is not okay. I've had meals with these people, but all of a sudden, this is not okay. I felt really, really unsafe. Spoke to my friend about it, and she was like, yeah, they're liming. They were talking, discussing cricket, which is one of the major pastimes, in Trinidad. And they were passionate, but they were doing it in a way that I didn't understand what was going on. But my nervous system went, yeah, this is in my environment and this is not safe. So that's one area where we get information. Another area would be what's going on inside our own body. So, like, am I hungry? Everybody knows, that whole hangry thing
Yes.
is a thing. And actually, neuroception helps us understand it. If our blood sugar goes too low, then actually that is not safe internally in our system. So it kicks up, well, we won't get into all the, the technical stuff of what happens, but essentially it then puts us into a fight. Come on, let's have some adrenaline, let's get some action here. And we get that kind of stroppy, which is our sympathetic fight. Same thing can happen, or no, I don't know how you go when you get really ill. For me, when I get ill, I head more to a shutdown place. And I don't want to talk to anybody. And I just want to be quiet and I want to be still. So, what's literally going on in us physiologically inside is another factor. Pain is a big one, but we'll leave that. How we're communicated with. That's a biggie. Literally the words people use to communicate with us, the tone of their voice is another part of that. The speed. I went out for a meal. Was it last night? I think it was even just last night. Gosh, days are weird at the moment. We went into this restaurant where we expected and always have been able to just walk in, get a table, and it's really quite quick because it's like a carvery. So you pay your money and then you can go up to the area, get the food that you want from the different pots of food, then go sit down and eat it, right? It's fast, but it's good food. Well, when we got to the lady who was dealing with new guests, she was not okay. She was not okay. And she was trying to be, I'm here to do a job, and I'm here. My job is to tell you that, no, you can't have a table till 7:10. But she did it in a way where every word was clipped and it had a real kind of punch behind it. And I just thought everything, because I was hangry, right? I knew that I had to take responsibility for myself, and everything in me just wanted to say, you're not okay right now, are you? Are you feeling really stressed? Because I could hear it, and I knew exactly what was playing out between her nervous system and my internal hunger and need for food, and her, blocking this. And there were loads of spare seats, so it didn't make sense. But we can hear it. Once we start to tune in, we recognize the way that other people speak either is calming to us, neutral to us, or actually is like offensive to us somehow and puts us in a defensive state. And finally, which is, I think, the most important part, and it's the reason why I wrote a whole book about neuroception, is the final area where we decide if we're safe, we're in danger, or our life is under threat is the state of the nervous system of the person that we're with. So, children are experts at this.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, they are. And coming back to that whole advocacy thing, I was in enough schools, worked with enough clients, did enough observations to see what exactly was playing out. And it wasn't okay that a child was being blamed for their behavior when actually it was the adult who was really stressed.
Yes.
And one of the things I say in the book is that children behave their way to safety, right? So if they're stuck in a classroom or, and it could be a homeroom, it doesn't have to be in a school. If they're stuck with somebody who they don't feel safe with, and this might be somebody who was fine this morning, but has since had a bad email or a phone call or something's, got to them, and now they're angry, but they're trying to keep a lid on it, the child knows, right? And if they can't cope with being in that same space as an adult nervous system that's in fight, they will behave their way to safety, which means they can very rarely say to us, "Oh, excuse me, I don't feel safe with you right now. You feel a little bit, like you're in sympathetic fight to me right now. Would it be okay if I just go outside for a while you sort yourself out?" They don't get to do that. They behave their way to get out, or get sent to their room, get to go outside for whatever reason. Even if it's a bad reason, their body has got them safe. They've got away from an adult's system that they're just not okay with.
Yeah.
Behavior is the biggest way they get to communicate.
Absolutely. And a lot of times too, it's like you can see the child's behavior playing out, like the needs of the adult that they're stuck in connection with. Like if the adult really wants to yell, but has the self-control to not, like the child will then yell. It's like they're playing out right through that neuroception.
Yes, but it may also be that the adult has just shifted into a fight state, and the child is okay with a fight state and knows how to express that. So they will match that because they're getting a sense from the adult, "I'm not safe right now because you're not safe."
Yeah.
So then they're like, "Well, my neurology has shifted now. I've gone into fight too." And some children will fight and will express. Other children very often will shut down.
Yep.
Right. So then they just go silent. They go super compliant. They go uber obedient. And that's not, it's the world says those kind of kids are great. And from a nervous system perspective and somebody who specializes in working with trauma survivors, that is not great. Not at all. So I always say, if you have a child who is loud, who is expressive, who can shout, who can stand up for themselves and say no or why, that is a much healthier place in the nervous system to be than a child who just shuts down and goes, yeah, whatever.
Yes. Oh, yes. Agreed. Okay. How does trauma affect the nervous system? I know, for some people, especially those with trauma histories or even certain neurodivergences like PDA, that threat detector can be overactive, right? Or so very easily triggered when in fact, people who don't have that same trauma on board are not reading, a threat.
Yeah. So I do a whole day training on trauma in the nervous system. So let's, into a tiny weeny little sentence. It's in a nutshell. I think the best way to understand it is if we are in a quote unquote, we've had a good enough upbringing, we are in, and I mean from utero, not just from birth, all the way through from conception, then we will have a nervous system that can move and visit those three different states that I've been talking about. When trauma happens, a huge amount of energy goes into either helping us fight or to run and get away from what's ever happening, because you're saying, if there was somebody attacking you in a car parking lot, my instinct is, no, I want to get out of there. I want to be able to run, to use my flight. And And then if that doesn't happen, then we've got into the shutdown place. And I have completely lost what my train of thought was. What's the question? Trauma. There we go. And even if we are in a traumatic experience that is literally life-threatening to us, it is totally overwhelming, we go into shutdown, we go into a freeze, or we go into a collapse. And that is there for a reason, because that is the only way we have figured out that we can survive this thing.
Yeah. So
very often after trauma, our nervous system stays stuck. That's kind of the key message, right? If we've been there once and we've not been able to process and to come back to safety, to express the huge energy from a sympathetic, I need to fight this, or I need to get away, or we've gone into a shutdown, then we get stuck. And that becomes like I talk about it as our home from home. It's like we set up camp in living life from that space. I've got another story if you want another story.
Yeah, please.
Right, my dog, I write about him in the book. Let's just say from the get-go, he sadly died 2 years ago. So I'm going to get through this story because it's a really important one. I think it really explains this whole thing really well for people. You may have seen on the TV images of the north of our country. So kind of Cumbria, it's beautiful scenery, lots of rolling hills, lots of huge expanses of where there's just little farms dotted around the landscape and stuff. Within those hills, there'll be fields with cattle in them, either cows or sheep, and people can walk through those fields generally. So this is going to be important, right? Imagine a stone wall, pretty straight, and then 1 meter, 2 meters max, away from that is another fence. So this stone wall's been there like over 100 years, easily, if not longer. Very ancient, very established. And then we have this fence that runs literally in parallel. So between the two of them, you have this channel. And very often farmers build this channel to help their cattle move from one field to a lane or to another field, a couple of fields down the way, stop them going off, meandering and exploring. Okay, so we've got our channel ready there in our minds.
Yes.
I was walking into this field with my dog, and he was at this point 7 months old. So, heading out of gorgeous, cute puppy into teenage stage. Very strong, grown already, and pretty muscular. Still gorgeous, obviously. But all of this was new, and this was his first experience of cows. We went into this field, and I could see in the distance across the middle of this field, there was this like little gate style that's where we were going to get out of this field and then move on with our walk. In the far right corner was a herd of cows, just, not a huge amount, 20, 30, didn't count them, but, enough. And I thought that's fine because they're all just munching the grass. They're not paying attention to us, and they're far enough away for us to be able to do this. So I send my friend over first to go ahead of us, and she gets to the stile. She's like, yeah, that's fine. We'll be able to get this dog over. It's not a problem. So I'm like, okay, come on, Hinton. So I'm taking him, and because I'm a responsible dog owner, he was on a lead because you never let dogs loose around wildlife in the UK like that. Well, we get halfway across this field, and all of a sudden the cows, oh, look, interesting things happening in our field. So they stop eating grass and they start walking towards us. And they walk and they walk, and they're getting, intentionally faster. This is not a little amble. This is a we're coming to see you walk. Well, my 7-month-old dog is now going, all of these big things, because they're huge compared to his size. I don't like this. And he starts pulling on the lead. His nervous system is going into flight. He wants to get out of there, and he wants to run to do it. I know if I let him run, we are going to have a stampede, because that will just get the cows to start running as well. And I was not up for that. So I'm like, it's okay, they're just cows, they're just curious. And I'm trying to use my sing-song voice to just reassure him and me, this whole thing is going to be fine. And I'm holding on to his lead, and it's like, yeah, we're going to get there, it'll be fine, not a problem, blah, blah, blah. And thankfully, we did get to the edge of this field and through the gate just before the cows got close enough to us for it to get really interesting. Outside of this gate, we're into this tunnel, the channel that I told you about. Straight away, because I knew there would be no cattle, no sheep, no nothing. I could see right to the end of it. I just let him off the lead, and I was like, go. And he ran. Right. So all of this energy that had got his sympathetic nervous energy that I had prevented him from using his flight needed to be expressed, right? His muscles needed to make that movement of, I needed to run, I need to run, I need to run. And he, you know, if you know dogs, you can tell what's going on when they're running. Sometimes it's a fun run. I just want to run as fast as I can and see how it feels. It wasn't that kind of run. It was I'm running for my life run. And he ran as far as he could that way. And I called him, and he turned around and he came all the way back again. And I was like, okay. Eventually, he calmed. I just let him run back and forth until he himself had run it out. That is how I prevented him from that traumatic experience potentially sticking. Yes. And I have some great photos of him being curious and being in his social engagement, being in his ventral state with cows later in life. If that first experience of cows had blocked that energy in his system, the trigger of being around cows for the whole of the rest of his life would have not been okay, but also it would have changed his nervous system.
Yeah.
That energy gets in and it doesn't get a chance to be
would have been stuck.
Yeah, exactly that. So, and that happens to all of us as human beings too. And more so if the trauma happened to us when we were children, and even more so if it was complex trauma, which is very different to normal kind of what we would call one-off trauma when we're older. You know, the complex trauma that can go on for children between the ages of conception right the way through to 5, 6 years old literally impacts how the brain then develops. And I work with adults now who, they lived life was trauma. There was persistent unsafety, the persistent, maybe particular instances and moments of things that were horrific and horrifying for them. But even living in a house where there's persistent unsafety, loud shouting, aggression, unpredictable siblings, or parents who are struggling mental health things or addiction things, all of that has an impact on a nervous system. So if a child starts out in life knowing that their shut down place is their way to survive and do life, that stays with them until they get to work with some really good therapists later on in life, likely. Sooner the better, as children, that would be great. But I know there's a lot of adults who are struggling with that now. And, you say to people, oh, well, we just need to be calm. Being calm is utterly terrifying for somebody whose nervous system has never had the chance to really experience what social engagement really is like. It's there in all of us, but if they've never had prolonged experiences of being there, that in itself is so weird, it's terrifying. Yeah. And that's a really, really important message, I think, for anybody who's wanting to try and get their head around this whole nervous system thing. It seems so easy to understand. Okay, well, there's 3 states, and then there's neuroception, and that's 4 things. Really getting into what does it look like? What does it feel like? How do we scratch and sniff and experience the sensations and our functionality and how we interact with the world in each of those states? as an adult, but what about if we're a child? And that's again, it's one of my advocacy things. It's like I will speak out for those people who are now trying to do grown up with their own nervous system, who's like stuck because they had to be stuck. They had to hide and shut down when they were little. And very often the pattern can go that those people have children whose nervous systems aren't in shutdown, but they're huge energy ones.
Yes.
Which makes it even scarier. So, when you're living with big energy, but your instinct is, no, I need to shut down and be safe. That's a really tricky dynamic to manage.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned in your story with your dog, that when your dog, the cows were moving closer, you were communicating in a sing-songy voice and, very intentionally sort of projecting a certain energy.
Yeah.
Co-regulation is actually one of the most significant and invisible things I do as a mother. So I would love your help in kind of naming it and explaining it and bringing awareness to it.
Okay. You just named it. What do you watch?
So what is it? Basically, a lot of primary caregivers, especially, a lot of us are gentle parents and homeschoolers, and we're with our kids all day. A lot of our kids are neurodivergent, and there's a lot of energy that goes toward co-regulation. And a lot of times that's all happening really below the level of awareness. No one's really, they're exhausted and they don't know why. And one of the things I loved in your story is that you brought a lot of intention. It's okay, my dog needs my co-regulation in this moment. So I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to help cue safety to the dog so he can sort of tap into my social engagement system. So I'm hoping you can just sort of speak to that a little bit more, help us understand how co-regulation works.
What I didn't say earlier when I was talking about neuroception is that it's like a computer program that is running the whole time in the background. It's like a tab that is always open, this question of, am I safe? If I get that sense that I am not safe, then my nervous system moves and I go into fight or to flight or to shut down. The most tricky ones to work with as a parent probably are the fight or flight, which is anger, rage, or anxiety in children. That's how they kind of express. And it's really important, I think the first thing is remembering that if we want to be able to co-regulate a child, we cannot do it without awareness of ourselves first. That's neuroception. That is the message of neuroception. It's we have to know that we are part of this picture. If our nervous system is in fight and they're going into anxiety, we've got a real mismatch there. And they are constantly reading our system. So if they're anxious and we're angry, they are never going to be helped by whatever we say or we do, because we're not safe for ourselves yet. Yeah. A friend of mine I went for a walk with yesterday, and she was a bit late, so I had to wait for her in the rain. And at the end of the walk, she apologized for having been late and explained why she'd been late. And her teenage son was trying to apply for summer jobs, decided he was trying to apply for one particular fast food outlet, which I will not mention the name of, but your readers would probably have heard of it too. And it was an online application. He started doing this kind of 10 minutes before she had to leave to come walk with me. She thought that'll be fine. It'll just be put your name in, here's your email, we'll be in touch. It wasn't. It was a whole shebang, questions and assessment and multiple choice, this, that, and the other, and personality stuff, the whole lot. And I was like, God, he's just going to be, giving people chips or cleaning the floor. I don't know. Anyway, she is getting more panicky because she knows she's going to be late for me. The more stressed she's getting at it's not working out the way she thought it was going to, the harder it was then for his brain to work. Because that's what happens, right? When we're not in our social engagement, when we're not in safety, our neurocortex shuts down. So we cannot think, we cannot plan, we cannot make those shopping lists or pack a suitcase to go on holiday. that's why, because we need to be in that state to get that part of our brain. Well, that started playing out. So he's not got his thinking brain working, and he's trying to fill in an online employment thing. And it's not a great scenario. So there was no co-regulation going on there, because she's like, no, just concentrate. No, just concentrate harder. And we laughed about all of this, because I was like, do you remember you knew somebody who wrote a book about this? She's like, oh my gosh, you're right. No, it was my fault. I was really stressed. It wasn't a big deal. And she went home and things got sorted between them. But to do co-regulation, we have to know ourselves first. And that's really hard. It's a really big ask, because it's so much easier, especially if our nervous system, and this is another kind of, it's like insider thing. When you work with nervous systems a lot, when we're not safe, we don't focus in, we focus out. We need to keep scanning what's going on, and we focus on the problem, whatever is causing us to feel unsafe. That might be a situation, it might be a website, it might be our child, and their behavior, or their lack of behavior, or their lack of communication. So whatever it is, it's like it's going on the whole time. And if we're not grounded, if we're not socially engaged, then our focus is always outwards. It's really hard to go, actually, I'm not okay. And that's one of the biggest things that we can learn to do if we want to get better at co-regulating, is to actually recognize for ourselves when we are not okay and deal with that first. And I often say to parents, look, where is the place in your house where you can go and be on your own? And for most people, it's the toilet. Seriously, it's a place you can go, you can shut the door, and nobody's going to interrupt you, at least for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And if you say, as you leave a room, I need to go and do some work with myself for a minute, I'm not feeling okay right now, I want to go and sort myself out, I need to just take a minute, and then I'm going to come straight back and help you with this. Go do it. Because if you don't, you're going to be fueling a fire that you'll never be able to help to put out, right? So we have to be able to sort ourselves first. The other thing with co-regulation is it teaches a baby's nervous system that it can go into defense state, fight or flight, getting angry, getting anxious, getting upset, and then come back again if they have a repeated experience of being soothed, right? Somebody sees where they're at, doesn't tell them off for feeling hungry, doesn't tell them off for feeling uncomfortable in a wet nappy, or, doesn't bring a negative, threatening response when they're expressing, I'm not okay right now. If that can be seen, validated, and then understood, then we can help to soothe and bring you back again. That needs to be happening like hundreds and thousands of times for their own nervous system to get the hang of, I can go into this place, I don't have to get stuck there, I can come back into a safer state. But if we've had a child, like my complex trauma people, right, who've been stuck in their nervous systems, then we need to understand that what might take, well, first of all, they're going to need some help to get unstuck in their nervous system, and that might be specialist help. But then it's going to take longer for them to learn how to receive co-regulation. I read something, I was just reading something on the internet earlier today for parents. It was a coaching thing, and said, when your child's upset, you need to give them a hug and reassure them they're okay. I was like, everything in my body just went no, how dare you, right? If a child is angry, if a child is scared, and possibly that's because you're stressed and you've just shouted at them, or you got really snippy about something, and then they do something and you go in and give them a hug, ick. Just, it's too much. So I think in the co-regulation process how do we work with our children and their nervous system, first step is we work with our own nervous system. Second step is we learn what actually are their things, right? Because my next thing is breathing, right? The world has put out this message that everybody needs to breathe to calm down. For some people, yeah, breathing can be really effective. For many people, it's not. If they've had an experience of struggling with choking or any other issue around an interaction where they couldn't breathe, I'm not going to get into any technicalities there, but there's a lot of reasons why somebody might have a trauma rooted in not being able to breathe, medically or interpersonally. Do not try and tell somebody to breathe, because no, takes them straight back into unsafety. So it's about knowing our children and our children discovering for themselves what actually soothes them. As a general, you know, if they've gone into a fight state, the energy is big, the movement is big, the muscles are tight, everything is big and loud. Do not tell anybody to be quiet when they're in that state. Doesn't help. It will explode them into louder, right? Essentially, whatever they can find that helps them to slow down, just slow down. And that might be singing, like where their rhythm is regulated by an external song, not necessarily by you. Could be you could sing together if that helps them, or just put on their favorite music where there is a slower beat, not a crazy, you know, jumping around song. Moving is a really good thing to be doing. Swinging is a really, really good thing to be doing, right? If they need to be outside to cool down, to calm down. I would never say calm down, because it's, again, a highly offensive thing to say to somebody, guaranteed to get the opposite effect. But going to have some time on a swing, or going to have some time outside bouncing a ball or shooting hoops, or even like mowing the grass, do something with that energy, but in a productive way. So you don't have to be there with them to bring them down. For some children, they need that. For some children, it will make them worse. They need space to be able to, and they need, you know, they'll figure that out for themselves, what works, what feels better in their body. But if you can model it, what works for you, knowing what works for you and what doesn't work for you, it gives them permission to be able to know themselves better and say, yeah, that helps me feel nicer, that doesn't.
Right.
And step out of the compliant, I'm being told to do this, I need to just say yes.
Right. So with helping our kids, like we have that co-regulation piece of sort of like be the state you want to see in your child, like focusing on your own state regulation. And then you've talked about some strategies we can use to kind of move ourselves, or that our children can use to move themselves between states, like with some autonomic flexibility. Is there anything else that we can do? Or do you have any other tips in that regard about how we can move ourselves or our kids up and down the ladder, like music, physical movement? Is there anything else?
Oh gosh, there's loads of things, like 100,000 things in my membership. We have a whole vault of different kind of tools, but I think I didn't say one of the key things to remember is if your child's nervous system has shifted into fight, flight, or shut down, that is an indicator to not be talking. That is not the time to be processing anything, right? No reasoning, no trying to learn lessons, none of that will work while they're in that state.
Yes.
And very often hugs and close relational stuff doesn't work either. They have to be able to come down or move back into their safer place first. That's if their nervous system isn't stuck from earlier trauma, as we spoke about. Other things we can do is to remember that the shutdown, the child has gone withdrawn, they've gone silent, they don't want to move, then make them safer with blankets, with letting them be on their own. And when you then start to interact with them, if they're not starting to come out of it themselves after a little while, really tiny movement, really tiny, like, is it okay? And I always ask permission with people when they're in this state, right? You never just assume it's okay to invade their space. It's not. You have to get permission. And is it okay if I just hold your hand? Is it okay if I just rub your back? Is it okay if I just brush your hair? Whatever works for them. But always, just because it's worked in the past and they've enjoyed it in the past, keep asking permission. Shows such respect for them and gives them autonomy over what is safe and what's not safe. So tiny movements, massaging a hand, literally just getting them to move that much, playing hand games together can be enough to then start to shift the nervous system out of that stuck, I can't move state. So if it's big energy, we want to slow it down. If it's stuck hiding energy, then we need to create safety, blanket forts, beds, duvets, cuddly toys, and then slowly, gentle connection, slow stuff. Don't put any loud music on. Don't try and chivvy them out of it. Just let it come really gently.
One interesting thing in your book that you talked about that probably a lot of people aren't aware of is that the behavior can actually get harder sometimes, as on the caregiving front, as they move out of dorsal, because then they move through that, the fight or flight on the way to that social engagement system.
Always. And yeah, gosh, I've been around this so many times with school staff where a child is easier to manage. Maybe they're selective mute and they're completely shut down. They're not a problem in a classroom because they're just compliant the whole time. Then they start to move out of that. And like you say, when we come out of, so one of the things, here's another little hobby horse. This is just a little one, but you'll hear a lot of people use the window of tolerance as their kind of go-to descriptor. I want to get them back in their window of tolerance. Well, Dan Siegel, his window of tolerance visually shows us a map of a nervous system where we have our social engagement in the middle and our hyper arousal activation sympathetic at the top and our hypo arousal dorsal shutdown at the bottom, right? And so from that, it's easy for people to think it's an either or option. And if I've gone into shutdown, then I just have to go back up into engagement, right? That is really not helpful when we are really working with people whose nervous systems have gone into shutdown and been there a long time even. It's much, much more helpful for us to understand that we only get to shutdown when we have already tried the sympathetic stuff, the energy, the muscle tension, all of those things of huge amounts of energy in our system haven't worked, either as we've tried to make them work or in a split second we just knew that wasn't going to help us, and then we went into shutdown. But we took with us into shutdown that tension, that energy, that I've passed that state of my nervous system and it's come with me into shutdown. And it might look really like quiet and placid and non-offensive. And so, when a child starts to come out of that, or even a grown up, because we specialize in this one, it's like all of a sudden I'm feeling all this stuff in my body and I don't like it. And I don't like it, so I'm going to go shut it all down again, right? The cusp between shutdown and our sympathetic is a really potent, powerful place. So yes, when children, if they're coming out of that state and we want to help them, we need to know and not be surprised if they start getting louder, if they start slamming doors, if they start getting more expressive than you've ever known before. And it might look like it's disrespectful, or, who is this child? Who have they become? This isn't my son or my daughter. It's like
creating safety isn't working.
It's making it worse. That's right. And actually, it's completely normal. It is completely healthy. It's part of a healing process. And if you freak out at that point, they will go back into shutdown and probably stay there longer. if you can be aware of it and go, oh, right, this is good. Yeah, it's uncomfortable for me because it challenges my own nervous system. So I need to up my own game on making sure that I'm staying safe and grounded. But essentially, this is a really good part of the process. And now we just need to help them move that energy, use their voice, do anything creative, right? Dance, movement, sports, art of any kind, sculpture of any kind, anything where they are moving and expressing and using and creating. That will help get through that stage. And then eventually you'll get to more of a
where we all want to get to.
And it's not easy. And that's the other thing, you know, people think, oh yeah, we just want to be calm, we want to be grounded. It's not easy. It's not.
Yeah. Having that autonomic flexibility where, like you said, you know, you have 100,000 repetitions of moving through those states. It's like the confident, you don't panic as much when you have a lot of experience moving through those states when you're in them. And, you know, those neural pathways get grooves and you have that muscle memory of, oh, I'm moving into that, you know, fight or flight state. Let me move it through. And it almost happens unconsciously. And, you know, you can move back and lots of practice and role modeling.
It is. And for those of us, and I am one of them, you know, who started life with our nervous system majority of the time in a shutdown place, super good children, you know, never made a bad word or anything to anybody.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Making up songs, rhymes, raps, whatever a child is into, you know, they can make up their own songs, put their own words in. I'm a huge fan of making up words. I am not it has to be the right word and the word has to be in the dictionary person.
Yeah.
If you can find a better way to say it, then let's hear it. Right.
Yes.
Again, it just helps give permission to express however they need to express.
Love it. All right. The show notes can be found at sagefamily.com/podcast85, where you can also subscribe and get future show notes sent right to your inbox. So what are your favorite resources for people to dive deeper into this topic? Tell us about your book and your website and all the cool stuff you've got going on too.
Okay, so yeah, the book would be definitely my first place that I would suggest people go to. So that is groundedbook.net. There is a real version for people who like real books. There is an ebook for people who just like things digitally. And also I've recorded the audio. What was interesting about that is I insisted on doing it myself. And the feedback has been that a lot of people, even if they're not listening to the words, have really appreciated a really grounded voice to listen to. And so very often they just put it on and enjoy some calm.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is the first thing, groundedbook.net. The other thing, there is a TEDx talk that I recorded a few years back, which can be really useful as a resource to share with other family members, maybe, or if your child is in any kind of education establishment, to pass that to a teacher before then you follow up by giving them a copy of Grounded too. That can be really good. The third thing I would say is, if you feel like you've kind of got the gist, the basics of this whole polyvagal way, how nervous systems work, then taking it the next step, I recorded 24 videos with 8 world experts around conversations kind of like this, but on how our nervous system works, what neuroception looks like in different experiences of life, right? So I had a brilliant conversation with a guy called Steve Haynes. He wrote the Really Strange books. Trauma is Really Strange, Pain is Really Strange. There's a whole caboodle of them. Phenomenal body worker. And we talked about pain. That's been a really, really useful one that a lot of my members go back to over and over again on that one. Voices, we did one on digestion. I did one actually on screens and technology. and what goes on in our nervous systems there. Can't even remember what the other ones are. But anyway, they're great. Oh, making mess and mistakes. That was another fun one. They were essentially just for the people in my coaching community, but the response was just too good, so I've made them available to anybody, right? So they're called the Grounded Grown Up Conversations. Yeah.
Okay.
And if you want to understand what this looks like in everyday life, however old you are, for yourself or for children or whatever, then they are a really good next step.
And are those on your website as well?
groundedgrownups.com.
Okay.
groundedgrownups.com. You will get the TEDx talk, the book links, conversations link, and if you are interested in the coaching thing, that's actually a really small community. It's not like a big membership thing. I work literally with people, so that's something else. You can reach out if you're somebody who's like, my nervous system actually is stuck. If you're one of those people, we kind of specialize there in working with people who come from complex trauma as their own child experience, because we need to work in a slightly different way to discover what safety is. So that's what I do in the coaching community. But yeah, nice. For everybody else, it's like there's a TEDx talk, there's a book, and then there's the conversations. They're good for everyone.
Awesome. And I'll also recommend the book Polyvagal Theory in Therapy, which was my sort of, jump into polyvagal theory. And it was actually Deb Dana who recommended you to me. So that's a good book. If you're got that real nerdy brain, that wants to get into all the meaty technical bits, that's a fun one to chew on. So thank you so much for joining me here today, Claire. This was a fabulous conversation, and I'm super excited to bring polyvagal theory in this way to all these families out there who have been sort of circling around the topic. Lots of people have been asking me about it, and now I feel like we've really given them okay, here you go. Come on in, walk through the door, come into this world with us. So thank you.
For sure. You're really welcome, and thank you. And sometimes you go on, I have had the experience of being on podcasts and stuff, and people are like, no, just come and, just talk and bring all your insight and your years of experience and stuff. And then they don't really say, and let's do this in a reciprocal way where genuinely, I really hope my people go and get your book. And do you know what I mean? That kind of responsive thing. So I really appreciate you doing that too. Thank you.
Oh, no, my pleasure. And seriously, the book Grounded is wonderful. Would be my number one recommendation for the intro into this, especially because my audience is all parents. It was super easy to digest. It completely made sense and it really resonated with me. And so if it resonates with me, I know it will resonate with all of my audience. So thank you for writing it. And thank you for coming here to have a conversation about it.
You're welcome.